Welcome to Lessons from a Podcaster, a show where we interview podcasters from all around the world and ask them to share their tips, insights, stories, and everything you need to know to grow your own podcast. This show is brought to you by PodSqueeze, the essential tool for any podcaster that wants to take their show to the next level. Let's get started with our host, Tiago.
Hello, welcome to the show. Today I have with me Josh. Josh is an expert in multiple podcasts. He has already launched and sold one podcast, but today he'll be focusing on one specific. Josh, welcome to the show.
Tiago, great meeting with you. Great connecting with you. You guys have an incredible business. I use your software on every single one of the shows that I run. I run 4 of them, and every single show that I coach my clients with and that I build shows, we're using your software. So really good job. Really good connecting with you.
Thank you so much. That's what I like to hear.
Yeah.
I know that you have a lot of shows, but there's one in particular that is there one in particular that you'd like to pitch today in our 30 seconds challenge?
Yeah, I host 4 podcast shows, but the one that I'm going to talk to you today is Podcast Host Army. So let me know when you want me to go, and I'll give you my pitch.
All right, 3, 2, 1, go.
Good. Hey guys, I'm the host of Podcast Host Army. My name is Josh. I run a bunch of different shows, built some, sold some, had some hit iTunes top of charts. I run this series on Podcast Host Army, focusing on interviewing podcast experts on launching, growth, and monetization. We do a 5-minute format. So if you want to learn how to grow, launch, or even monetize your show, head on over to podcasthostarmy.com to learn more.
Perfect. I think you got a lot of podcasters interested in that because that's exactly what we all want, right?
I think
So
so.
let's try to get here a little preview in our. It's a short episode, but a preview of what podcasters can learn. So let's say someone is about to start their podcast. Let's try to go through the whole journey. So someone is about to start their podcast. What should they ask themselves? How should they prepare? How should they come up with the idea? What's the first step?
That's a great question. So let's look at 2 different types of podcast shows. There's one that I would call like mission driven or just fun, like a hobby, right? Let's put those aside and let's talk about shows that support your business. All right. So let's talk about
Okay.
business podcast shows or shows that help support your business. If you're going to start a podcast, you have to have which of these are you going to start? Something that's a hobby, it's fun, or it's a part of a mission, or am I trying to grow my business and make money doing this? Let's focus on the first one, right? I'm trying to grow my business and make money doing this. When
Right.
you're starting your podcast show, it should, first off the bat, it should support your business model. A lot of times people create a podcast show that doesn't support their business model, and what it does is it causes a distraction for them or a diversified focus, right?
Right. What does it mean to support a business model?
Right. Okay. So I have an investment company, right? And we do real estate investments, and we do private investments, and I have a show called The Deal Scout, right?
Okay.
So I'm out there looking for strategic deals, right? And I meet with people that are deal makers. So every time I'm meeting with someone on my show, they're a potential partner, client, investor.
Okay.
So if I started interviewing baseball players, talking about baseball players, and I do investments, it really doesn't support the business model. So the
Right.
first thing I want to encourage people to do when launching a show is, does it really help support what you're trying to accomplish? You
Yeah.
know?
So it's if we take our example with PodSquiz and lessons from a podcaster, we get to interview our clients, right? So that this is, I guess, supporting our business, correct?
Right. So I'm a client times 4, and any single client that I coach, I encourage them to use yours. I'm an affiliate of yours. So you interviewing me supports your business model. You get
Right.
all this content that becomes your marketing, it becomes your sales, and you could even upsell me during our conversation, and we could do bigger
Yeah.
deals together. So it's
Okay.
it's a very good alignment for you guys to have a podcast show.
Okay. So if we focus only on that, let's say someone wants to, create a podcast to support their business, which a lot of our clients and a lot of people, a lot of businesses are starting podcasts around the world.
Mhm.
So you first try to see something, a topic that supports your show, correct?
Correct.
Let's say we can even take our podcast as an example. We identify that we want to speak with our customers or potential new customers, upsell, learn what they're going through, and as well, learn from them so that we can support other customers and share the knowledge.
Mhm.
What should be the next step? Once I decide I want to do this, what should be the next step?
A lot of people get this wrong. When they start up their podcast show, they start thinking about the audience. And the audience is a very tricky thing to focus on, but they start building and I have to help a lot of podcasters change their mindset about audience. So the second thing you should focus on is your podcast should be able to support the business model with just the guest and your strategic community, not even
Okay.
including the audience. So forget the audience for a minute, put them off to the side,
Mhm.
because it's very hard to get someone who's listening in on the other end to do something, and you have no control if they're gonna
Right.
do it or not.
Mhm.
So audience comes third. So first thing, support the business model. Second thing, you have to be able to drive business and to be successful and to help drive your business forward with just your guest and
Right.
your sponsors, your partners, your strategic allies. Has nothing to do with the audience as of now. So
Mhm.
if you could do that, you're winning. Those first two steps are huge.
That's great advice because you cannot control how big the podcast gets, but the other parts you can control, right? So that makes total sense.
Yeah.
How do you go about inviting guests and identifying these people, and how do you connect to them and say like, hey, come to my podcast? Like how to be successful with that cold message?
Yeah. So I've built 20 shows, sold one, like we said. I've done probably 2,000 interviews. And I I once had a job back in the day cold calling people, making 100 phone calls a day, cold calls,
Wow.
right? "Hey, would you like to buy this?" No. My conversion rates were terrible. And then one day I got this idea of having a podcast show. So instead of calling them to try to sell them something, I reached out to them on LinkedIn and I said, "Would you be open to being on a podcast interview?" Yep. My conversions went through the roof because I just wanted to ask them some questions. I wanted to get to know them. I wanted to share their knowledge. My audience in LinkedIn grew, right? So I started accumulating an audience. But what happened is people started saying yes to connect with me. So I just asked them, "Hey, would you be open to being on a podcast interview?" Some
Okay.
people go yes right off the bat. Some
Hmm.
people go, "Tell me more." And then you could tighten up your pitch a little bit there, but I think it's as
Definitely.
easy as
Yeah.
that.
That's true. I have the same experience with, well, not with the sales calls, but also like I was always surprised with how easy it was to get people to speak in your podcast. Whereas if you just want to have a chat with them without any purpose, just the purpose of connecting, they'll be like, okay, I'm busy. But if you say like, hey, for a podcast, they don't even ask how big is the podcast,
Yeah.
which is crazy.
Nobody
And
cares.
yeah, it's such an interesting kind of hack, right? It's a great sales hack. So
Yeah.
it's a very interesting point. So you just basically identify your clients, your leads,
Mhm.
and instead of saying, "Hey, let's have a chat," for me to sell you something, you do something for them. You be like, "Okay, come and you'll be a guest on my show."
Yeah.
So you start the interviews. Is there any kind of preparation one should do for the interview? Like maybe send some questions or prepare something.
I used to do a ton of preparation. I used to do a ton of like I'd read their book, I'd study their stuff. But now I do 5 to 10 interviews a day. I do
Mhm.
very little preparation. I have them fill out a basic form
Okay.
that kind of gives me an idea. And I've done this 2,000 times. So I could look at someone's LinkedIn or their website or their profile, and I could get an idea of general questions, because I have pattern recognition doing this so many times.
Right.
I could have a question, I could dive in with someone pretty darn quick.
Okay. Is there any question that you almost never skip? A question that is really important that people should ask?
I
Something to increase engagement or for you also to collect knowledge?
I think the best question you could ask it, the guest is how could people, what kind of deals are you looking for? What kind of people are you looking to connect with, and how can people connect with you? So it gives them a chance to self promote. It
Okay.
gives them permission to do that. And a lot of times people go, "Hey man, I really appreciate you asking that."
Right. Hmm.
So it's like,
But
sell to
the
my audience. Here you go. It's why
yeah,
not?
the the issue with that, and I know that audience is our only our third, priority, but it's still important, right? So is this also something that you keep in mind, how to somehow have engaging questions? Because if someone just comes to a show and just promotes themselves, then it's not very interesting content for others to listen, right?
Yeah.
So how do you manage that? Like, is there any specific question that will all people always like to hear or something like that?
Yeah, I think, I could always ask you, and if you look at every single podcast, out there, the most common questions are, how'd you get started? What books do you recommend? What tools do you recommend? But if you ask someone like, if you ask like a second level question of, you know, who are you? Not what do you do?
Right.
Like, who are you? What's important
Okay.
to you? And then they answer and you go, why is that important to you?
Mhm.
And then you could go digger. So like what you're trying to do is get them to fall off of their sales script or
Right.
their memorized, thing that they go on
Yeah.
every single podcast show and spit. And you're trying to just get them to be a human. And you're
Yeah.
like, hey man, that must have been really hard when you lost that business. Like, how did that impact your relationship with your spouse?
Mhm.
Eh,
So connect with
Or
them in a
growth?
more human level, right? Because humans like to hear humans, right? Not scripts or sales scripts. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great advice. So once you have the show ready, you have recorded. Um, what's the process to take it to, like, live?
Yeah. So what I do is I have a intake process that has been pretty much automated. When I find someone that I want to connect with, I have templates and scripts. I just copy and paste, and that gets them into our funnel, and they get to pick a time to do the interview. I show up,
Okay.
I do the interview. After the interview, I copy and paste the link of the recording into a Google Sheet. From there, my team, I have a virtual assistant, my team puts it through Pod Squeeze. It creates the show notes, creates the transcripts, it creates keywords, it creates questions and posts. So your software has allowed us to go from running one podcast show to now I run four. It's a part of my business model across my different brands and businesses, but then my team goes ahead and posts those things on both the world of podcasting and YouTube,
Mhm.
and then all our social channels.
Okay. Is there do you see that YouTube is worth, because I know that a lot of platforms, they don't share on YouTube. Is it worth it to share on YouTube?
So I talk about total addressable market. In the world of podcasting, everyone's getting into podcasting. There's a lot of new podcasters coming into the marketplace, but
Yeah.
not as many new listeners. So what happens is all these new podcasters are fighting for existing listeners. So it's harder and harder to gain an audience, which that's why I tell people focus on that third. With YouTube, it is still growing at a rapid pace for new creators and new people jumping into YouTube as a search engine, as an educational tool. So if you're going to spend time creating content with people like you and I are doing today,
Yeah.
put the audio on the world of podcasting, put the video into YouTube, and then create shorts from it. You guys do that as well.
Hmm.
Why not?
Yeah.
That's the highest and best
Definitely.
use of the content you already created is to repurpose it.
Hmm. Is there any technique, any tips you can give to create a good short that has a lot of engagement? And as well, how do you connect the short with your show? Because sometimes people just check the short, they are so short that you cannot even like do any branding.
Yeah. That's a good question. We're still trying to figure that out. AI has done a pretty good job, and software platforms like you guys do a pretty good job at, creating shorts and creating these things. My team says if you'd like to listen to the full episode, you can, click here. But that's hard to do because with the shorts and the reels, people are just clicking, watching, scrolling, next one.
Yeah.
So we're still trying to figure that out, to be honest.
Yeah.
But I think the brand, if you put your brand on it, they'll see it and then they'll go click on the link to go to the main channel's YouTube or
Mhm.
whatever.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's quite a new medium, and it's growing a lot. So people are also like trying to figure that out. But that's absolutely true. Having like a little branding annotation.
Yeah.
Um, you told me before we started that you sold the podcast, and I never thought that was possible, even because the podcast is connected with the host. So what does that mean to sell a podcast? Does it mean that you're still the host, or you sell it to some company? How does that work?
Yeah, I've done both, right? but the way I did it is I set up a podcast show. It was a great idea. I went through the process of gathering all the domain names, the social handles. I created the format, the structure. I gathered a list of potential sponsors. I actually sold a sponsorship into it. This
Okay.
was before the show even started, and I got it going, and just life happened. We had another kid. We went
Mm.
through financial issues, and I was going to close it down. And I started talking with someone. They said, "Hey, I was going to be on the show. What are you doing with it?" I said, "Can't afford to keep it going." They said, "Well, what if I kept it going?" And then I wound up selling it to them. Now,
Oh.
it wasn't I didn't, cash out and go buy a yacht. It wasn't that kind of money, but what it did is it told me that people have a hard time starting stuff, and I already
Yeah.
started something, so it saved them time, energy. They liked the format. They just changed a few things in it. They were up and running. They acquired it and ran faster. That just changed the way I look at it. Now I'm looking to maybe buy shows and to grow shows with other people.
That's very interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a very good point. Starting it's hard. Starting, coming with a format, coming with guests, it's a lot of work, and this work is valuable for other companies or hosts. So yeah, that's a really great point.
for sure.
Um, yeah, Josh, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. I think people learned a lot about starting a show, and they got a little glimpse of your what's like to listen to your own podcast, which helps people out to grow their own show. Tell us again, what's the name of the podcast, and how can we find you on social media and listen to your shows?
Yeah. So podcasthostarmy.com. That'll if you want to like start a show, grow a show, monetize a show, why not listen to, hundreds of other podcasters sharing their experience, and you could watch it in 5-minute clips. Find a category that's important to you and dive into that. And then reach out to them and ask for help, or ask me for help. You can find all of our social and, contact information on that page as well.
Perfect. I will also link it in the show notes of this episode. Thank you very much, Josh.
All right, you're welcome, man. Bye everybody.
This podcast is brought to you by PodSqueeze, an essential tool for podcasters that creates show notes, timestamps, clips, and more. Visit podsqueeze.com and use the code PODCASTER for 20% discount in the first 3 months. We release a new episode every Tuesday and Thursday. See you in the next episode of Lessons from a Podcaster.